All right, so we're going to talk about the International Criminal Court. What even is the International Criminal Court? So we'll get into it. So the ICC was established under the Rome Statute in 1998, and it began sessions on July 1st of 2002. The International Criminal Court, the ICC, is not to be confused with the International Court of Justice, which is the ICJ, also known as the World Court. All right, the ICC tries individuals, whereas the ICJ handles disputes between nations. That's the difference between the two. So we got a couple alternative names for the ICC. The first one being the International Colonial Court and the International Caucasian Court. It's pretty interesting. Why would the ICC have these two names instead of the International Criminal Court? Why would they replace criminal with colonial and Caucasian? So this is foreign policy. There's an article there. This is from the Gambia. It says the ICC should be called the International Caucasian Court. And the subtitle is Gambia is the latest country to leave the ICC. Now, why would they have that sentiment? Why would they want to call it the International Caucasian Court? Why would they want to leave the ICC? All right, so let's reframe the ICC. So think of the ICC as an addition to the Bretton Woods Institutions. All right, so think of it as one of the Bretton Woods Institutions. So what are the Bretton Woods Institutions? You have the World Bank and the IMF. All right, so two things to consider. The World Bank president has always been a U.S. citizen nominated by the United States, and the International Monetary Fund's managing director has always been a European citizen. All right, so why would people refer to the ICC as the International Colonial Court? Why do they refer to it as the International Caucasian Court? So now we're looking at the ICC through the framing of it being just another one of the Bretton Woods institutions, okay? And you'll understand what that means in a second. So what is the purpose of the World Bank and IMF? You know, why is the World Bank always headed by an American out of D.C.? Why is the IMF always chaired by a European? To answer these questions, we need to put all of this in its proper historical context, okay? Yeah. So we're going to need a history lesson because you cannot understand the present moment ahistorically or decontextualized. All right. So, and to start this off, we got to talk about colonization. All right. So on the left hand side here, we have Cecil Rhodes, Mr. Cape de Cairo. And then on the right hand side, we have some art that seems to be depicting the Berlin Conference in 1885 when they were divvying up that magnificent African cake. All right. So what is colonization? Let's have an operational definition. So colonization, the process of establishing control over foreign territories or peoples by force for the purpose of exploitation and sometimes resettlement. All right. So what we have here is the difference between, you know, just an ordinary colony and a settler colony. All right. And that image, the image is from Kenya during the Mau Mau uprising, otherwise known as the Kenyan Land and Freedom Army, most notably led by Dedan Kimathi. So Kenya was a settler colony, which meant that surplus British population were able to move there. And in order to make space for them, the indigenous people you see here, the Kikuyu people, were removed from their very lush and fertile land. So, of course, they resisted, right? But to keep this specifically about colonization in general, let me show you some maps just to put a lot of this in context. So you see here Africa and South America. So this is from 1914. Now you look at South America on the left-hand side. So you know the Portuguese colonized what is now Brazil. The Spanish colonized most of the continent, from all the way down from Argentina and Chile all the way up to Colombia. And then you have Guyana, Suriname, French Guyana, and then Africa. You can see, so this is 1914, so you see the Germans there. So quick factoid. So, the word genocide wasn't coined until white people were murdered in Germany, during the Holocaust. But the Germans carried out a Holocaust in Southwest Africa of the Herero people. Now, this is 1914. So Namibia was listed there as German, East Africa as Tanzania, and then you can see Cameroon. Those were then given to the French and the British. So the British took over Tanzania. South Africa kind of like annexed Namibia. And then the French took over Cameroon. So this was one map. So this is prior to World War One. Because, again, the Germans lost their colonies in Africa after World War One. This is North Africa. So you see the French in Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia. Libya was the Italians. Then you have the British in Sudan and Egypt. Then you have the Middle East all the way over to the Ottoman Empire up there. Then you have some parts of Iran, Persia that are taken. And then you have here Southeast Asia. So you have the British, obviously, were in India. The Dutch were in Indonesia. The Spanish were in the Philippines. Now, it has the U.S. listed here because, after the Spanish-American War, basically the U.S. took over all the Spain's colonies. So that's how they got Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines. China at this point was, I don't know, I guess it was just beginning or during its century of humiliation. I think this was during the century of humiliation. So, and you see France was in Vietnam. They were run out of there, Battle of Dien Bien Phu. And so, yeah, but basically all this to say that what you have here is, now you see Europe lit up in red, right? What you saw was wealth, resources, labor value, and artifacts all stolen and brought to Europe from North America, South America, Asia, and Africa. All right. So we have this map here from 2010 using $2010 of gross domestic product, so GDP per capita. Now, I will preface this by saying, now this is a very old data from the World Bank, but I'm just using it to make a point. But I'll say before saying anything about it, that I am aware that there are people smarter than me who are actual economists and who are much better at, analyzing economic data better than I am on a macro level. And they posit that purchasing power parity is a better metric to use than gross domestic product. I can't explain that. It's been explained to me and it made sense to me, but I can't explain it in my own words. So I'll let an expert more so talk about that. But the point to be made here is that extracting wealth out of those places is why North America and Europe are so well to do right now. Okay. So isn't it ironic that the places in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia that have the most resources under their ground, they're the most resource rich countries, but they're yellow, beige, orange, and red. Whereas North America, Australia, and by extension, colonies like South Korea and Japan, and then Europe are also well-to-do. It's because of this dynamic. All right. So decolonization of Asia and Africa, 1945 through 1960. So between 1945 and 1960, 3 dozen new states in Asia and Africa achieved autonomy or outright independence from their European colonial rulers. Most African countries got independence in 1960. Some got it before, like Egypt. You'll see dates like 1922 for Egypt. No, don't take it. I say 1955 is when Egypt got independence. Ghana was 1957. I think Libya was 51. Morocco was before 1960 as well. But anyways, you get the point. So after colonization, now folks have quote unquote independence. You can't see me air quoting, but just trust me, believe that I am. So what happens when over imperialism becomes politically and socially untenable? How can systems of colonization and exploitation be maintained despite granting the colonies their independence? All right, I just want you to think about this, okay? I want you to think about the answers to these questions. These are rhetorical, but not really. Just here for you to think about. How do colonial systems persist while creating the illusion of self-governance? Remember those Bretton Woods institutions we talked about? The World Bank and the IMF? Meyer Amschel Rothschild once said, "Give me control of a country's economy and I care not for who makes its laws." What do you think that means? Decolonization never actually happened in the global south because these countries never attained economic sovereignty. That's the key. Yeah, it may look like your head of state looks like a person of color from that country, but he's not pulling the strings economically, then he is not the president. And we're going to see an example of this. But before we get there, I want to talk about one of my favorite poli-sci texts of all time, pivotal book that everybody should read. And I want to go to page 27, the last paragraph. Now, this is The Grand Chessboard by Zbigniew Brzezinski. I highly recommend this read if you really want to understand foreign policy, U.S. foreign policy, and the U.S.'s place and intentions and motivations for this policy. Okay, the subtitle is American Primacy and its Geostrategic Imperatives, and that's exactly what they're talking about. What he's talking about in here. So, anyways, page 27, the last paragraph. This is what Brzezinski says. In addition, one must consider as part of the American system the global web of specialized organizations, especially the international financial institutions. The International Monetary Fund and the World Bank can be said to represent global interests, and their constituency may be construed as the world. In reality, however, they are heavily American dominated, and their origins are traceable to American initiative, particularly the Bretton Woods Conference of 1944. All right. These institutions were created at a time where so much of the global South was getting independence. They needed capital. This was a way for the West to maintain control of those economies and deny them sovereignty and agency. So the core critique I have of these institutions is that they serve only to maintain a Western hegemonic status quo. So you got the World Bank, the IMF, the IAEA, the ICC, and by extension the World Court, and the World Trade Organization. All right, these institutions were designed by the Western powers after World War II. You know, at the Bretton Woods Conference. You know, for the IMF and World Bank particularly or specifically. This is a system where the rule makers are also the judges and the primary beneficiaries. Through these institutions, they make sure. Well, now it wouldn't be the same. It's not the same. So that now all that wealth isn't going to Europe anymore. It's going to Europe and the United States and, you know, the West, what we call the West. All right. So essentially, these institutions make sure resources, capital, labor value flows to the West. They exist to make sure the pillage can continue. This is the pillage. All right, I really like the one in the bottom left-hand corner where it just has Africa just dug up from a crater, and then all its material and dug up matter and dirt and is all up in Europe and the U.S. Upper right-hand corner, you got some fat cat aristocrat crying like a baby being fed by a starving person. You know, it's basically what it is. It's basically what it is. All right. So y'all are all forced to live on $2 a day and send all your resources and labor value to Europe so Europeans can live the high life. So this is the global South living off of $2 a day. And there goes Europe living the high life. That's how it was. Because all the wealth was stolen from these places. All the labor value was stolen from these places. So neocolonization. We're going to talk about that too. All right. So look at these cartoons. So on the one on the left, you have you see the West. They had a gun. They forced people into slavery, And now you see the guy is just in a business suit. He has a clipboard. And now, he doesn't have to force people into slavery. They control the media, so they just control what you think. So you just volunteer for your slavery. And then in the bottom right hand, you have, I claim this land in the name of His Majesty. So this was like, colonization, taking land from the land grabbing and like displacing and genociding the native people. So now you have the guy, he's out of his knight uniform and now into a suit and saying, I structurally adjust this land in the name of economic growth. So we're going to talk about structural adjustment. All right. But anyways, covert versus overt, using media and propaganda to influence you to their position. Right. This is the dynamic here. And then outright theft via pillage, and a pillage at the barrel of a gun versus IMF World Bank loans with, usurious interest rates, you can't keep up with. You then default on the loan, and then they implement structural adjustment and get to pillage your country again. So change overt colonialism to neoliberal exploitation is basically what this does. All right. So the same wealth they stole from you, they're lending back to you. It's completely diabolical. So, or they use that wealth to bribe a countryman to run the country to their benefit as opposed to the benefit of the people, which is a source of a lot of conflicts in Africa. The West doesn't want you to know about that, though. See? That's called DEI. I call that DEI colonization. Diversity, equity, and inclusion colonization featuring black faces in high places. So and bombing Africa was okay when Obama was president. And then all of a sudden you had black folks who were suddenly like okay with war and like imperial adventures abroad. So it's put a black face in a high place. It's amazing how some people respond, So sticking with the structural adjustment theme, I want to go say more about that. So I want to actually define it. So structural adjustment is a set of economic reforms that a country has to adhere to in order to secure a loan from the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank. So think of structural adjustments as a set of economic policies, and these could include reducing government spending, opening up free trade, opening up your industry, and so on, right? So structural adjustment is just a nice segue into this book here I have on the screen called Confessions of an Economic Hitman. Fantastic book by John Perkins. So the thesis for this book is that the U.S. maintains global dominance through economic manipulation and exploitation rather than through traditional warfare, using professionals like Perkins to carry out this strategy under the guise of developmental aid. Okay, so what is the strategy? So there's a covert system of economic imperialism that's used by the United States to exert control over developing nations. And John Perkins claims that he and others like him, aka economic hitmen, were employed to manipulate the economies of foreign countries through fraudulent economic forecasts, unsustainable loans, and strategic bribery, right? So remember that cartoon, right? About structural adjustments. This is what we're talking about here, right? I structural adjust this land in the name of economic growth. So the ultimate goal is to ensnare these nations in debt, therefore making them politically and economically dependent on the United States, particularly the U.S.'s multinational corporations and government agencies like the NSA and the CIA. This is how they capture. This is the imperial capture of a country through economic means. All right. So we talked about colonization. This stuff tells nicely into neocolonization too. So colonization, especially settler colonialism, is extremely overt, bloody, and violent. Okay. So now what is neocolonialism? So neocolonialism is essentially neocolonization instead of direct colonization with their armies is a total control of your economy. All right. So the use of economic, political, cultural, or other pressures to control or influence other countries, especially former dependencies and colonies. Right. So now they're just not there with their armies, making sure they brutalize you, and forcing you to do what they say. Now they just control your economy, right? So let's go back to last year. This is 2024. This is Reuters. Protesters march in cities across Kenya against planned tax rises. All right, so let's read what they say here. So in Nairobi, hundreds of demonstrators marched through cities across Kenya on Thursday to protest against plans to raise 2.7 billion in additional taxes to reduce the budget deficit. So this is June 20th, 2024. All right, this is not to be confused. We're going to talk about that some other time with the Gen Z uprisings that are happening now, summer 2025. All right, this was last year. All right, so let me highlight some of this. Protesters say the tax rises will hurt the economy and raise costs of living for Kenyans who are already struggling to make ends meet. The Kenyan parliamentary panel on Tuesday urged that the government scrap some new taxes proposed in this financial bill, including new ones on car ownership, bread, cooking oil, and financial transactions. So the one that they left out here was lady products like, tampons, maxi pads, things like that. So how's that for, this pink washing empire that loves to go in for women's rights, but they're going to do that type of thing. And financial transactions is a big one because that's M-Pesa. So everybody in Kenya uses M-Pesa, right? That's use it for everything. People use it through their phone and they put M-Pesa is everything. So they're going to tax people's M-Pesa transactions. That's diabolical. So riot police, fire tear gas to disperse pockets of protesters in the financial district of the capital, Nairobi. Let me highlight some more of this. So right here at the very bottom, the International Monetary Fund has urged the government to increase revenue in its 2024-2025 budget to reduce state borrowing. Let's go back to another slide. Remember this? The International Monetary Fund's managing director has always been a European citizen. So you have some European person just sitting in DC IMF headquarters, literally telling Kenya, you have to pay more for bread, cooking oil, sanitary products for ladies. Like I said, how's that for pink washing? Like they like to do, they love to do that for Afghanistan. They always good about the virtue signaling. They want to tax financial transactions and M-Pesa transactions because Kenya has to pay back a loan to the West. This is how I want y'all to start thinking about this. So this is the managing director of the IMF right here. Miss Kristalina Georgieva. All right. So I'm sure Miss Georgieva is a very nice lady. But I also know Miss Georgieva needs to get her Gucci bags. She needs her Hermes products. She want to put some money down on a new beachfront condo. And somebody got to pay for it. So the Kenyans need to pay that rent, pay that neocolonial tax. So that the folks up the top can live good. Right? So it's no wonder that, Kenya's in the red on the GDP map, right? So you see, that's Kenya right there. See Kenya in the red? See the tack, the yellow tack? That's where Kenya is. Let me put it back. There you go. See the tack? Now, Miss Georgina, or Georgieva, her country's in the blue up there. See, Ms. Georgieva has a mechanism of control called the IMF that makes sure wealth transfers from places like Kenya to places like where she's from, or Europe and the EU. That's what these institutions are all about. Okay? That is a key thing you need to understand. All right? So history lesson concluded. I hope you learned something. All right? So moving on. Back to our regularly scheduled program. We have the International Criminal Court, the International Colonial Court and the International Caucasian Court. So again, the question was, why did our brother from the Gambia describe this court in that way? So I hinted at it earlier, let's go back to that foreign policy article, and let's read what it says. So again, Gambia, the ICC should be called the International Caucasian Court. Gambia is the last country to leave the ICC. So let's read what it says. Let's just read the highlighted. So Gambian Information Minister Sharif Bojang said the court was clearly designed by Western whites to target African blacks, echoing complaints by South African and Burundian officials that the international justice system focuses its attention solely on cases from Africa. The ICC, he quotes, he says, the ICC, despite being called the International Criminal Court, is in fact an international Caucasian court for the persecution and humiliation of people of color, especially Africans. All right, this is Karim Khan. Let me just read the highlighted. So it says International Criminal Court was created in 1998. We know that. So to date, all 44 people indicted by the court have been Africans. This article is from Foreign Affairs, and the title is "A Truly International Criminal Court: Why the New Prosecutor Should Look Beyond Africa." Okay. So yeah, today all 44 people indicted by the court have been Africans. In recent years, the ICC has opened investigation of cases from places outside of Africa, including Afghanistan, Georgia, and the Palestinian territory. So again, places that the West finds to be enemies, or not so much Georgia. Georgia, they're trying to flip and make it, try to make it another front against Russia and cause some problems for Iran down there in Russia. But the court remains fixated on a single continent. 10 out of its 14 active investigations involve Africa. So the ICC likes throwing black and brown people in jail. What country does that sound like? So these are statistics. Excuse me. These are statistics from the United States. So black people were substantially overrepresented in 7 and 10 jails. Roughly 1.8 million people were incarcerated in the United States at the end of 2023. In China, the estimated prison population totaled 1.69 million people that year. Other nations had far fewer prisoners. Now, the thing about this is China has far more people than the United States does, like 3 times, maybe 4 times. And still has a lower prison population. So ICC is literally just a macrocosm of the West, right? So you have here also racial disparities in prison incarceration rates in the United States. So it's right on brand for them to only go after Africans. So where you have racial disparities in arrests, prosecutions, and sentencing in the United States, particularly for black and brown individuals compared to their white counterparts, it's the same for the ICC, where you have white Westerners in charge of a body that has international jurisdiction over the world. It does not shock me that people who are the most indicted are people of color. All right. Now, see in this picture, you have Bahar Idris Abu Garda and you have Al Hassan Abdul Aziz. Now, if you go down this whole list, everybody looks like these two guys. Everybody looks like both of them. This is the ICC. You know, the only bad people are people of color. You know? Now, Putin. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying Putin isn't the only white person to ever be indicted. There are some people from the former Yugoslavia that had ICC warrants or were like persons of interest for the ICC, if I remember correctly. But I want to bring your attention to how the West treats ICC indictments. All right. They do not stand on principle at all, as we'll see. All right. And also, and maybe this will be another video specifically, particularly zeroing in on the Putin indictment, because it gets very interesting. I mean, there's so much misinformation and nonsense going around, particularly about this Russia-Ukraine conflict. But that's outside of the scope of this particular video. So we're going to stay focused on the ICC. But this Karim Khan interview, Listen to what he has to say here. All right.
Of the individual is the protection of babies. I mean, these are fundamental American values that should engender bipartisan support. Now, of course, this situation, unfortunately, lies on the San Andreas fault of international politics and strategic interests. And of course, I've had some elected leaders speak to me and
All right, there were some. I think the audio was a little too low, so we'll try to listen to it again. This is Karim Khan. Listen to what he has to say.
Of the individual is the protection of babies. I mean, these are fundamental American values that should engender bipartisan support. Now, of course, this situation, unfortunately, lies on the San Andreas fault of international politics and strategic interests. And of course, I've had some elected leaders speak to me and be very blunt. This court is built for Africa and for thugs like Putin, was what one senior leader told me. We don't view it like that.
So this court is meant for Africans and thugs like Putin. I think that really says it all. I feel like that's what that person said to Karim Khan is exactly how the ICC is used. I mean, all you got to do is look at his indictees, right? So today's takeaway, what I want you to take away from this. The ICC, like the World Bank and IMF, is a mechanism of neocolonial control wielded exclusively by the West to control, loot, and punish the global South. It is what it is. So, something else to consider. The United States is not even a signatory to the Rome Statute. So being a signatory to the Rome Statute means that, you come under the jurisdiction of the ICC. On top of that, of not being a signatory to the Rome Statute, the U.S. also has a Hague Invasion Act on the books. So that calls for the United States to use all means necessary and appropriate to free U.S. military and allies, including Israel, from the court if they're ever indicted and taken into custody. The law also restricts U.S. participation in United Nations peacekeeping unless the United States obtains immunity from prosecution. Tell me you're going to commit war crimes without telling me you're going to commit war crimes. So why can the U.S. be such a cheerleader for the ICC when it's not even a signatory? So they love to invoke an ICC ruling against people it does not like, but it's not even a signatory. It doesn't even make any sense. So check this out. Putin arrest warrant. Biden welcomes ICC war crimes charges. And this was March 18, 2023. Couple months later, 2 months, 2 days later, Biden, lawmakers blast ICC's intent to charge Israeli leaders. So here's where the blatant hypocrisy comes in. There's no such thing as standing on principle when it comes to the West at all. All right. So now they sing the ICC's praises when they when they have a warrant for somebody they don't like. When it comes to Netanyahu, though, suddenly it's an outrage. Check this out. Here's the United States Senate, April 24, 2024. These are all your U.S. senators. Who's here? I see Tom Cotton, Mitch McConnell, Marsha Blackburn. Who else is here? Ted Cruz, of course. Rick Scott, of course. Tim Scott. Marco Rubio, of course. I got a bunch of neocons in here. But look at this highlighted part. It says the United States will not tolerate politicized attacks by the ICC on our allies. So they call anything against Israel is politicized. Target Israel and we will target you. If you move forward with the measures indicated in the report, we will move to end all American support for the ICC, sanction your employees and associates, and bar you and your families from the United States. You have been warned. All the United States does is threaten. That's all they do. And here's all these folks and how much they get from AIPAC. Just a bunch of paid shills, man. Nobody represents the American people. We don't have a government. We don't. United States citizens do not have a government. So some more hypocrisy, some more cope. Let's listen to this.
Should punish the ICC and put Karim Khan back in his place. And if the ICC is allowed to threaten Israel's leaders, we know that America will be next. If the ICC moves forward with its absurd warrant arrest or request, this is going to be an even bigger international problem.
Okay. Okay, so let's keep it going.
But the crux of this for the United States is that we do not believe that the ICC has jurisdiction on this. That being said, we work closely with the ICC in a number of key areas. We think that they do important work as it relates to Ukraine, Darfur, Sudan. But again, on this particular instance, they just do not have jurisdiction.
So every excuse to absolve Israel from its genocidal war crimes, you know, it's lovely to see the United States jump through hoops and tie itself into pretzels to try to absolve Israel of all these crimes, but at the same time wants to point fingers at everybody who ever had an ICC indictment and use that for justification for its sanctions, its tariffs, or any other type of aggressive, subversive action. It's fascinating to me. So neither Russia nor Israel are signatories to the Rome Statute. So how is it that the Biden administration cites that as a reason for the ICC to have no jurisdiction over Israel, but then applauds the warrant for Putin when Russia is also not a signatory? It makes no sense. It's a contradiction they just refuse to talk about, or they just make up some bullshit cartoon level rationale. It's remarkable. So again, Reuters here, U.S. House passes Republican bill to sanction International Criminal Court over Israel. And this was June 4th, 2024. So let's listen to what they have to say here. What is this? This is News Nation.
Russia's war in Ukraine is bringing back a semblance of the Iron Curtain, more and more of the country being isolated from the outside world, businesses, entertainment companies, and news outlets withdrawing to some degree. And according to some officials, so is Russian President Vladimir Putin. Joe Colonial is in.
So that's basically saying that Putin is isolated. And, you know, again, Western media lives in its own bubble. It does not live in reality. All it does is create narratives for its sheeple citizens to follow, right? So, again, Putin is not isolated. Okay, the West just creates narratives that the sheeple follow, but it's not reality. Okay, so if you live in that media bubble, I'm telling you, get out of it. It's you're literally plugged into the matrix. So Putin is only isolated if you think this is what the total land mass of planet Earth looks like. Okay, so this is what we call the West. So the countries represented here, well, it's just all the EU, Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, United States. Right, that's the West. Okay. So Putin is isolated if you think this is what the international community looks like. Okay. Yeah, the whole world is sanctioning Russia, and here you go, the whole world highlighted in yellow. All right. So what Julius Malema says here is pretty much what the rest of the global South is saying. You really have the U.S. and Europe, who only make up about 10 or 11% of the world's population, pretending that they're the rulers of the universe. And the world has really had enough of it. You know what I mean? So I think a lot of people share this sentiment. So let's listen to what Mr. Malema has to say here.
ICC, Putin is welcomed here. And no one is going to arrest Putin. If needs be, we'll go and fetch Putin from the airport to his meeting. He will finish all his meetings. We'll take him back to the airport. We're not going to be told by these hypocrites of the International Criminal Court, who know the real violators of human rights, who know the murderers of this world. That former Prime Minister of Tony Blair admitted that they made a horrible mistake when it comes to Saddam Hussein. They've not been charged today. Bush is still there. They've not been charged till today. And then Obama killed Gaddafi. And then nothing has happened. We are here today with Libya being destroyed and unable to recover because of America. We know very well that where NATO gets involved, those are terrorists. We know very well where the US says we are going in to install peace. That place will never know peace as long as America has visited that place. So we don't want ICC's hypocrisy to apply here in our country. President Putin is welcomed. We know our friends. We know the people who liberated us. We know the people who supported us. In Kutokonaval, the weapons that were used in Kutokonaval that led to the liberation of South Africa were coming from Russia. Russia supplied us with weapons in Kutokonaval. Cuba supplied.
All right, there's some error with the playback, but there are so many clips similar to this one, like, you know, where the global South. I have one presentation I'm going to put up. It's called Global South Clapbacks, where we have the global South just clapping back on the West with their nonsense. But I'll save that for another time. So continuing on. So we got Reuters here. France on ICC warrant for Putin. No one should escape justice. France believes Israel's Netanyahu has immunity from ICC arrest warrant. Now, mind you, neither country, Russia or Israel, is a signatory to the Rome Statute, but, you know, it's the ICC did a great job for Putin, but with Netanyahu, no way. How U.S. politicians responded to Netanyahu's ICC arrest. Biden administration fundamentally rejects decisions as lawmakers issue threats and call for sanctions against the court. So this is as late as November 21st, 2024. So all year they were bitching last year, 2024, about this ICC warrant for Netanyahu. They were livid about that. Because, again, remember, the ICC is for Africans and for thugs like Putin. Okay? Not for anybody in the Western world, you know, who are above the law, you know. So Al Jazeera, let's read some of this. Okay, so Al Jazeera, when Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke in front of the United States Congress earlier this year, the lawmakers stood up and clapped for him dozens of times. You know, he had an ICC warrant, but they clapped for him dozens of times, and overseeing a whole genocide, but they clapped for him. Both sides of the aisle is bipartisan. Now that he is a formally suspected war criminal wanted by the ICC, the adoration he received in Washington, D.C. in July from U.S. politicians is turning into anger and threats against the Hague-based tribunal. But anyway, just skipping ahead, with a few exceptions, U.S. politicians from both major parties expressed outrage at the court's decision, with many questioning the court's legitimacy. Damn, when it was Putin who got arrested, they were singing the ICC's praises. They couldn't stop glazing the ICC. Now that they indicted Netanyahu, now it's like the ICC is not legitimate. Wow. So it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican. Israel's support is bipartisan. Okay, so just like many other things with this giant purple party. But damn, the hypocrisy knows no bounds. Like, they don't stand on any principle. You can see it right here. So this is Matt Miller. So the whole room laughed at his silly ass when he during this press briefing. So he tries to fit a square. He tries to square the circle here, and the whole room just winds up laughing at his dumb ass. Here, just listen to this.
The regime, or Assad himself, should be held accountable. Will you support his application to stand in front of the ICC as a war criminal who committed crimes against humanity?
So we support the work of the ICC. I know that obviously we have disagreed with their hold on. I'm gonna let me address it.
You support the work of the ICC until they do something about it.
So we have had a lot. Let me just answer the question. You know what, Matt? Let me answer the question, because I was addressing that before you interrupted me. We obviously have had a jurisdictional dispute with them as it relates to cases against Israel. That is a long-standing jurisdictional dispute. But that said, we have also made clear that we support broadly their work, and we have supported their work in other cases, despite our jurisdictional dispute when it comes to Israel. But that said, when it comes to Assad, I suspect that before you ever get to the ICC, the people of Syria are probably going to want him to return home and stand judgment for his crimes in
He's
Syria.
not going to return home. I mean, these are Russians under the Russians' protection.
I doubt that he's going to. I mean, if he's not going to return home from Russia, I doubt he's going to transfer himself to The Hague, leaving Russian protection. Either. My point being, should he ever decide he's willing to.
All right, I think that's the end of it. I don't remember it cutting off abruptly like that, but that's okay. So anyways, Matt Miller was a State the State Department's spokesperson under Biden during the Biden administration, 2000 and 2024.
For calling out the Biden-Harris administration.
Oh wait, I meant to preface this, but he's also known as
the regime, as it himself should.
I'm sorry, I keep messing up these slides, but he's also known as Smirkula because throughout this whole genocide, he just smirked his whole way through it while he was at the podium giving the State Department press briefing. So in the previous clip when he was questioned, that was Matt Miller, because you notice he said, we support the ICC's work, and then like Matt Miller hopped in and said, yeah, you support the ICC's work up until they indict or do something against Israel, then you don't support it anymore. That was Matt Miller. Matt Miller is a legend. If you ever watch the State Department press briefing, you can be sure that he will ask some tough questions and ask some great questions. Really, really enjoy Matt Miller in that space. But in the next clip, we're going to see Max Blumenthal from the Gray Zone. He's going to roast the hell out of Matt Miller, and well, not roast the hell out of Matt Miller, but basically roast the State Department, the whole briefing. He's going to talk about. Anyways, just watch for yourself.
For calling out the Biden-Harris administration for turning a blind eye to the genocide in Gaza.
300 reporters in Gaza were on the receiving end of your bombs. Why did you keep the bombs flowing when we had a deal in May? We all knew we had a deal. Everyone in this room knows we had a deal, Tony, and you kept the bombs flowing. Why did you sacrifice the rules-based order on the mantle of your commitment to Zionism? Why did you allow my friends to be massacred? Why did you allow my friends' homes in Gaza to be destroyed when we had a deal in May? You helped destroy our religion, Judaism, by associating it with fascism. You waved the white flag before Netanyahu. You waved the white flag before Israeli fascism. We'll have the time to take questions at the end. Your father-in-law was an Israel lobbyist. Your grandfather was an Israel lobbyist. Are you compromised by Israel? Why did you allow the Holocaust of our time to happen? How does it feel to have your legacy be genocide? How does it feel to have your legacy be genocide? You too, Matt. You smirk through the whole thing every day.
Whoa. Who is that?
Legacy be genocide. You too.
There he is, Matt Miller. Dime store Count Chocula. You know what? That's an insult to Count Chocula. I'm sorry, Count Chocula. I should not have done that.
Smirk through the whole thing every day. You smirk through a genocide.
Thank you. And then, of course, if you look at it a little bit further, there's another video as well. I want to pull this up here. Let's go and pull it.
But anyways, shout out to Heartlands Media. That was Click Cabela who captured that clip. But anyways, that was Max Blumenthal. He was grilling Anthony Blinken. And then Matt Miller made a, smirking through the genocide. He made a quick cameo at the very end there. So smirking through a genocide as part of the Biden administration, and then doing he was part of the Obama administration, I believe. Sorry, I'm getting everything mixed up. But anyways. He was in a Biden administration, and he served as a State Department State Department spokesperson, or one of the State Department spokesperson. But then I saw another clip of him, and I think I have that next, where he was saying that, under the Biden administration, he had to support, everything Israel was doing. But now that he's not in the Biden administration, because the Biden administration is no longer was defeated in the elections, now he's done a total 180 and can, even though he's not saying it's a genocide, he's saying that he doesn't support what's going on. So when he's at the podium, he can express he said he can't express his own personal opinion. He has to say what the U.S. government tells him to say. So basically these people are just stenographers. They're just paid actors, basically. So, I do have this clip next. So Sabi gets into it next. So let's see what she has to say.
During Biden's administration, we went after Matt Miller quite a bit on the show. It was very obvious that he was lying to protect Israel and Israel's war crimes. Now, Matt Miller has the audacity to come forward in an interview and admit that Israel has, in fact, been committing war crimes. after all those times he told you that they weren't. Check it out. Check it out, fam.
Do you think what's going on in Gaza now is a genocide?
I don't think it's a genocide, but I think I think it is without a doubt true that Israel has committed war crimes.
You wouldn't have said that.
So they all got the memo. By the way, they all have the memo not to admit it's a genocide.
I don't think it's a genocide, but I think I think it is without a doubt true that Israel has committed war crimes.
You wouldn't have said that at the podium.
Yeah, look, because when you're at the podium, you're not expressing your personal opinion. You're expressing the conclusions of the United States government. The United States government had not concluded that they committed war crimes. Still have not concluded that.
Let's go back to that part. Pay close attention.
I think it is without a doubt true that Israel has committed war crimes.
You wouldn't have said that at the podium.
Yeah, look, because when you're at the podium, you're not expressing your personal opinion. You're expressing the conclusions of the United States government.
These people are actors, right? These people are actors. They're not there to tell you the truth. They're paid to act and perform. And that's what Matt Miller did.
Exactly. So here's a look at the Netanyahu indictment, or the arrest warrant issued on November 21st, 2024. So they actually did go through with it. The charges are allegedly responsible for the war crimes of starvation as a method of warfare and of intentionally directing an attack against the civilian population, and the crimes against humanity of murder, persecution, and other inhumane acts from at least October 8th, 2023 until May 20th, 2024. So this is what the West is all upset over. How dare you hold any of us accountable? So here's Al Jazeera. Netanyahu visits Trump. Who else is he meeting and what's on the agenda? And Netanyahu meets U.S. lawmakers as Trump sanctions International Criminal Court. So again, it just shows you where they stand. They don't give a fuck about like this. Israel can do whatever it wants. I mean, we're witnessing a genocide on social media live, and the U.S. is just standing by it, just pretending it's not happening, and then just gaslighting anybody and just saying like, if you say anything about it, you're anti-Semitic. I mean, it's remarkable what's going on right now. Times of Israel. ICC demands Hungary explain why it didn't enforce Netanyahu's arrest warrant. So that's Viktor Orban. So again, they all show you, they all show you. So International Criminal Court cites Rome statute authorizing proceedings against non-cooperative party states. Budapest said during PM's visit that it would withdraw from the ICC. So now Hungary is talking about withdrawing from the ICC because it's getting called out by the ICC for not arresting Netanyahu. See, the rule of law is only for people of color in the global South. It's not for them. It's not for the West. They show you this all the time. Reuters, ICC judges reject Israel's request to withdraw Netanyahu arrest warrant. So this was July 16, 2025. They actually asked can you please withdraw the warrant? All right, so we got some more Malema, and we're going to close with this. This is another interview, and let's just get into it.
Vladimir Putin. Yeah. You know that the International Criminal Court wants Vladimir Putin to face war crimes charges.
It must start with Tony Blair. It must start with George Bush. It must go to Barack Obama. Then it can go to Putin.
So let's get this straight. You're saying to me that your policy, if you were in power in South Africa, is quite simple. That your enemy's enemy, and it seems you regard the US and its allies as the enemy. Yes. Your enemy's enemy is your friend. Never mind if he's a suspected war criminal. Never mind if the UN and the ICC say they have compelling evidence of Russian war crimes. You don't care. As far as you're concerned, my enemy's enemy is my friend.
You're exaggerating, but another point which you don't want me to go there is that Tony Blair accepted that they were wrong about Saddam Hussein to an extent that he did an apology of a thug, right? You have never called for his arrest. A man admitting that I was wrong. To how many people?
Hello guys, how you doing?
Are you the proper person?
I'm a proper guy.
I mean, I don't want to go too far back into history, but at various times you failed to actually file a tax return on time. Yeah. You've been accused of different financial offences. You've never been convicted, but some of those charges were never brought to court. But you tell South Africans, despite your own history, you are the guy to run their economy.
That's why. That's a mind of a lazy person who doesn't do his work. You will have to refer back to 15 years. I've grown up over a period of time, built a solid political party. The only thing you can keep on referring to is what you interviewed me about it 12 years ago.
Get something new, my brother.
No, I'm very...
Show a skill of a hard-working presenter who does his research. You can't falter me. Since I've made my mistakes on text when I was very young, when I was almost 27 years old, fixed that problem. Today, I'm a 42-year-old married man with children who has taken responsibility and built a solid party to be the third largest party without the support of white monopoly capital and the owners of the South African economy. You keep on referring to old and old things because you are now beginning to sound like a scratched CD.
You have every right to tell me you have changed.
Tell me of me now. I've been in parliament for 10 years.
I think aligning yourself with Vladimir Putin is going to be good for South Africa.
But that's what it is now. South Africa is in alliance with Russia, with India, with Brazil, with China. So why are you asking me as if it's some policy that is going to be implemented after I took over? South Africa is in alliance with Russia now.
South Africa right now calls itself non-aligned.
In the context of the war. But these are two different things. South Africa is an ally of Russia. Now, the second question is, where does South Africa stand on the war? It says I'm a non-aligned in relation to war, but Russia remains South Africa's friend. So we cannot create confusion around there. Don't create an impression that it is Malema who's going to come and create an alliance with Russia.
But there are some very specific...
Actually, I will go beyond that. I will go beyond the friendship with Russia, and in the war, I will align with Russia, and I will even supply the weapons to Russia. Because Russia is in a war with imperialism, and any agenda that seeks to push back imperialist agendas, it's well within the policies.
The question of...
You say, quite clearly, I would arm Vladimir Putin.
Yes.
You know that the International Criminal Court wants Vladimir Putin to face war crimes charges.
It must start with Tony Blair. It must start with George Bush. It must go to Barack Obama. Then it can go to Putin.
So let's get this straight. You're saying to me that your policy, if you were in power in South Africa, is quite simple. That your enemy's enemy, and it seems you regard the US and its allies as the enemy,
Yes.
your enemy's enemy
Yes.
is your friend. Never mind if he's a suspected war criminal. Never mind if the UN and the ICC say they have compelling evidence of Russian war crimes. You don't care. As far as you're concerned, my enemy's enemy is my friend.
You're exaggerating, but another point which you don't want me to go there is that Tony Blair accepted that they were wrong about Saddam Hussein to an extent that he did an apology of a thug, right? You have never called for his arrest, and then admitting that I was wrong. To how many people died there, killed by those people? So all I'm saying is, we are with President Putin because it's not enemy of my enemy. It is an anti-imperialist agenda that says the American dominance and its allies should be undermined at all costs.
Anti-imperialism, even though Vladimir Putin is quite explicit about his desire to revive a form of empire. He says countries like Ukraine have no right to independent sovereign existence. He appears to believe that the best thing would be to revive an empire, the Soviet empire. But you're anti-imperialist?
We are anti-imperialist. That's a debate for another day. The war is not what is the war is about the expansion. And had there been a common ground found, this could have been avoided. We are not for imperialism, even if it were to come from Russia. If he does that, we'll condemn it. But we know for a fact that progressive forces such as China have also aligned themselves with Putin to try and create an alternative from the imperialist domination of the world. And that's what the EFF...
Well, guys...
So, it's always interesting to hear, like, especially these guys, this British dude come in and like come from a place of, moral authority and say, we say that you are not supposed to support this person because they are indicted by the ICC. So how dare you? They always are like they have this moral authority over you, over the whole planet. And therefore you need to just like come to their position. It's just such this hubris, this narcissistic hubris. It's just amazing. But I have a bunch of I have a ton of clips that I'm going to put in the Global South Clapbacks video, because a lot of times these guys get checked and I love when that happens. But anyways, this was all about the ICC and like how it's just a tool of Western imperialism and how you see how they flip out when it comes time to apply those same principles, the ICC principles to themselves. They just, pretend that they're above the law and that, it shouldn't be applied to. It's like what Karim Khan said. It's for the Africans and for thugs like Putin, people that they don't like, and for people of color, the Global South. That's what it's all about. Hope you learned something from this, and hope you, I don't know, like, share, subscribe. Make sure other people see this, because a lot of this truth has to get out there. That's just my goal with all this. So anyways, hope you enjoyed the video. Take care. Until next time. Peace.